بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما تعلمنا وزدنا بفضلك علما وتعليما إنك على كل شيء قدير. So the last thing we're talking about with hijab is the emotional hijab, and this ultimately is the most important side of haya, of modesty, is how you carry yourself, right? There's a quote I saw, a story I saw some time ago, and subhanAllah, I wanted to have this quote here, try and say these very important quotes, where there was a girl, Bedouin girl, and she's out in the desert, and a man comes up to her and wants to talk to her. So she throws some sand in his face and runs off. And she runs home and says, Mama, this guy wanted to talk to me, but Mama, I had a lot of, that was inappropriate, so I didn't want to talk to him, and so I came running back and I threw dust in his face. So her mum was very smart and understood her daughter and said, had you dressed yourself in haya, he wouldn't have done that, right? And so we have to understand that there's such thing as body language and eye language and all these things. And Ibn Hazm, in his Tawq al-Hamam, in his Circling of the Doves, he speaks about this, how people communicate with eyes, communicate with the body, etc. And so it is the obligation and the necessity of men and women and men to carry yourself in a certain way, that there is a hijab. You put a barrier between yourself and other people, particularly yourself and other members of the opposite sex. And that is felt. It's something that is felt. You carry yourself in a certain way. And so that requires, first of all, that you know yourself. Many people have no clue about what they do and how they do things, right? There's no self-checks, or very little self-checks, and so they go through life. They're clearly showing off, but they have no idea. They're clearly trying to get attention from certain people of the opposite sex, but they have no idea. The answer is they do have an idea, but they're lying to themselves. So you have to be aware of yourself, aware of what's happening, aware of your, and do a lot of introspection so that you actually know what's going on. Number two, you have to be more careful than careful, right? So many people, they're careful, but in reality, they're not careful enough, right? We spoke about the screen, getting yourself into situations. You have to be more careful than careful, for more than one reason. In terms of halal, haram, right, of course, and for practical reasons, right? Somebody, you find yourself in a situation which is very difficult, and like, why did you even do that? So be more careful than careful, and inshallah it won't happen. And here we see, in the Quran, the interaction between two genders. Here is a handsome, chivalrous man, unmarried man, Sayyidina Musa, and one of the daughters of who we believe to be Shu'aib alayhi salam, has to come to him. She doesn't have a choice because her father's too old to go to him, and she has to go and speak to this man. So how is she described in the Quran? She says, then one of the two women came to him, walking on extreme bashfulness. Right? Tamshi al istihya. She's not walking on haya, she's walking on istihya. Right? On extreme bashfulness. So she really doesn't want to be there. Right? She doesn't. If she had a choice, she wouldn't be the person to be there. She wouldn't go and talk to him. But so as she's walking, it's almost like the ground itself is haya, is modesty, as opposed to very opposite. You're walking in a way is, please notice me. For men or women or men, the same. I want to be noticed. I'm trying to get your attention. I'm asking a question in a class so that someone hears me, right? So these kind of things, asking somebody, getting close to somebody, walking past somebody, parking a car in a certain place. We have to be careful. We have to know what's going on. So we should have a balanced awkwardness around the opposite sex. right? A balanced awkwardness. Is it analogous? Maybe not. Relieving yourself. Would you like to relieve yourself right next to somebody? Or would you prefer to have a bit of privacy? So yeah, I mean, it's nothing wrong with relieving yourself, but it's just you have hayat, right? You're shy about it and you would like to have space. It's kind of, right? It's private, right? As opposed to being totally fine relieving yourself in the front of everybody, right? That's kind of weird, right? Even if they're not going to see your nakedness, right? They're not going to see your body. It's just odd, right? So is it the same? It's not exactly the same, but there is some kind of analogy there, right? So maybe you can correct that and not call it balanced awkwardness. Maybe you can say not making yourself too comfortable around the opposite sex, right? That's how it should be, right? That's how it should be, is that you're not too comfortable. And so here, quoting Psychology Today, probably a load of rubbish, but the magazine or whatever it is probably not very useful. But here's a quote. This is a kuffar speaking, right? So this psychologist, whatever it is, he says, however, I couldn't help it. Oh, I fell in love. Oh, I fell into this awkward situation, or whatever it is. I couldn't help it. It's never an excuse, carefully speaking. Whether you're in a committed relationship and you accidentally fell in love with somebody else, in a professional situation with another person you're attracted to, or simply drawn to someone inappropriate, such as your best friend's ex, right? He says, although you may not be able to help being attracted to somebody, thank you, he confesses the exact point that we mentioned in lesson 1. That is just the nature of it. You walk past, you hear a voice, you see somebody, you're in the presence of somebody, you feel something, whether you like it or not. That's just reality, right? And that's exactly what we mentioned in lesson 1, right? Here's a kafir confirming it, is that it is the sexual act or sexual interaction is something that happens in spite of ourselves. We don't have a choice. It's not something you can turn on and off. It's there by default. Attraction is there by default. You do have a responsibility to recognize that attraction, so you're self-aware, early enough to take steps to avoid those feelings getting stronger, right? So it's not just, you're not just a train, right, on a roller coaster ride of feelings and emotions and hormones. It's not like that. You are actually responsible for what's happening to you, right? You have to take responsibility. So if we look at the process, right, here is an intrusive thought, right? You see somebody, hear about somebody, see somebody, whatever it is, you're around somebody, a thought comes to your mind. You're not responsible for those thoughts. Those thoughts are natural and that's fine. You're a heterosexual individual. That is how you think. Emotional inclination, physical inclination, these are normal and natural. Now, where's your part in it? The acceptance of that thought. Block. No. Block. Right? This is with anything. A doubt about Allah. Maybe Allah doesn't exist. Block. Maybe the Prophet did this for some personal benefit. Block. Maybe that person's lying and you have no evidence for it, but they're just bad because they're bad. Block. Right? So an intrusive thought comes in, you have now the ajr of fighting it. But you accepted it. So now in your mind you start playing with this person, thoughts about this person, images of that person in your mind. Okay? Playing with it, entertaining it intentionally, not blocking it, entertaining, and now it's an addiction and now you turn to resolve. I want to be with that person. Okay? That's what I'm going to do. And then action, right? And in reality, we can look at things in a bit more detail. In reality, it all starts off with relying on yourself. وَلَا تَكِلْنِي إِلَى نَفْسِي طَرْفَةَ عَيْنٍ, the dua of the Prophet ﷺ to Allah. Oh Allah, don't leave me for a blink of an eye. So you said, yeah, I'm a religious person. Why would I like have an affair with somebody else? What's your problem? Like, or why would I, I'm religious, I would never get involved with someone unless I was married to them, right? Why would that happen? Wrong, Habibi, wrong. خُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ ضَعِيفًا. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, a man has been created weak, mankind, men and women are weak. So you're like, oh yeah, why would I ever fall into, how could I as a religious person ever fall into that? Wrong. You're now saying that you are strong and powerful. You're not, you're weak. So number one is, oh Allah, protect me from munkarat al-akhlaq, right? Like bad akhlaq. Oh Allah, protect me from not lowering my gaze. Oh Allah, protect me from having an emotional affair. Oh Allah, protect me from getting involved with somebody in a haram way, right? So it's very important. Part of our ubudiyyah, part of our worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our slavehood, is that we like, yeah, Allah, I really can't do this by myself. Allahumma anni ala dhikrika wa shukrika wa husni ibadak. Allah, help me. Anni ala dhikrika, help me to remember you. Wa ala dhikrika, Allahumma ala dhikrika wa shukrika, and to help, thank you. Wa ala husni ibadatik, help me worship you in a proper way. You can't do it by yourself. So number one, you didn't ask Allah for help. That's what happened. Number two, you started to make wrong decisions. Why on earth were you in that group when you didn't need to be on that WhatsApp group? Why on earth did you click to make that big image bigger? Why on earth did you not put image block on? Why on earth? Why on earth? And now you have all these problems, right? Why on earth did you make these decisions? Now, excessive, intrusive thoughts are coming again and again and again and again. And then eventually you give into that thought, and then resolve, and then action. So it all starts off with being a slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Oh Allah, protect me from these things. Right? Be careful. The true intrusive thought comes, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen, you have the ajr for that. It comes in, a block. Comes in, block. Comes in, block. And now you have ajr, you have the reward for doing that. As opposed to you accepted it, and you resolved to do it. Right? Etc. etc. And so as the Prophet ﷺ said, looking, at the opposite sex, is a poisoned arrow from the devil. Welcome to the poison nuclear bomb of the devil, i.e. the holy screen. Right? So get off YouTube. Even if I'm here listening, I only put it here on YouTube because that's where you're going to be. Right? Otherwise, get off YouTube, get off the screen, get off the phone. Protect yourself. Right? Protect yourself. Men and women. Protect yourself because there's non-stop images everywhere. Whosoever avoids it out of fear of me, this is a hadith Qudsi that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I will replace it with a phenomenal level of iman, be imanin, right? The tankid is for ta'zeem. A phenomenal level of iman whose very sweetness he will feel in his heart, right? So this will increase his spiritual context. It makes it easier to do it. The more you look away, the easier it becomes. The more you look away in your heart, the more barriers you put in your heart, the more you turn to Allah, the easier it is. And as Ibn Atta Iskandari, he said, bury your very existence in the earth of inconspicuity. You can't, I don't exist. As opposed to, hey, notice me. Right? By default, we are built to want to be noticed. And by default, we are built to be wanted by notice, specifically by the opposite sex. Specifically by the opposite sex. It is a normal and natural thing for a man to try and get attention from women in general. And it is a normal and natural thing for a woman to try and get attention from from males in general. Know yourself, be careful, and specifically, don't try and get attention in general, and specifically do not get an attention. And sometimes it could be negative attention, right? That's kind of a teenage thing to do. Sometimes it can be very indirect. Somebody's coming to your house. You do something in your house that you know that they're going to notice. It happens. Be aware of what's going on. Don't label yourself as innocent. وَلَا أُبَرِّئُ نَفْسِي إِنَّ النَّفْسَ لَأَمَّارَةٌ بِالسُّوءِ Surah Yusuf. I do not claim innocence. Indeed, the self, the ego, is always continually commanding to evil. So don't think you don't need Allah's help. Say, Allah, protect me from these things. Right? Be very self-aware, and when it comes to the opposite sex, try and not be noticed. I don't want to be noticed by that person. Avoid it. Right? Within reason. Don't be obviously ridiculous. Right? And it says the seed that is not buried properly will never grow well. So you're not married and he's not married. You're not married and she's not married. One of the most mubarak things to do in that relationship is to avoid that person. That's like step number 1, avoid that person. Step number 2, find out if they're married or engaged. Step number 3, etc., etc. So how does shaitan ruin things? Right? How does the shaitan enter into our family? Is that it started off wrong. He saw her, she saw him, they're both at college, they're both graduating this year, and it's like, oh my God, it's like perfect match. Now you notice that, but now you got to look away, distance yourselves, as opposed to, let's try and get attention from her, attention from him, an emotional thing that develops. They spend time together, major mistakes happen, and then, well, let's get married anyway. That's not how it should be. That's a way of taking barakah away from the relationship. So you want to bury that relationship, your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and bury the relationship even with that potential other person, right? In the earth of inconspicuity. I don't want to be noticed at all by that person. Right? If you want the dunya, turn away from the dunya, and the dunya will come to you. That's how it works with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The dunya has been programmed, the dunya and everything in it has been programmed to serve those people who don't want it, and to weigh down and burden and make difficult for people who want it. So whenever you chase after something, in the wrong way, with the eye of want, right? Because I want to get attention from her, I have to get attention from him, etc. It doesn't work, right? So you have to put that emotional hijab, men and women, in emotional hijab. Be more careful than careful. Right? So in this lesson we've spoken about, in modesty, we've spoken about modesty in general. We spoke about the hijab and the technicalities of it, the spirit of it, all these different things. Some practical things to do with modesty. And then the emotional hijab, which is number one. How many a hijabi is not a hijabi? Because of the way that she carries herself. And the same thing with men, right? The same thing with men. I'm not saying it's women are bad, I'm not saying that. But the problem is, again, going back to lesson 2, I believe we spoke about this, is that Disney and the West have programmed women to get attention, that's good. If you show your body and if you're loud and proud and noticed by everybody, that's good. And it's not good to be quiet. It's not a good thing at all. That's not valued. Being hidden and not noticed is not a good thing. That's a weakness in your personality in the West, right? Whereas that's not a weakness. That's part of your strength. I can run a company. I can be educated. I can be influential. I don't need to be noticed by the world. And particularly, I don't need to be noticed by men. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك.